Welcome aboard, everyone. Simon here from the Whales of Wall Street. Hope you're doing well wherever you are in the world. Guys, we're going to talk about DAG today. Not just the crypto asset DAG constellation, but DAG in general as a technology of blockchain. So DAG stands for Directed Acyclic Graph. Guys, we're going to go through a couple of things here. What I'm showing on the screen right now is a principle of DAG. It looks crazy, but actually we can simplify it in this video for sure. Before we do that and go to DAG, I just want to talk quickly about blockchain. I'm not going into massive detail, but from my learnings of the deployment that I did recently in blockchain and cryptography, I'm going to give you some top level aspects of blockchain. So for those that don't know perhaps how blockchain is created or what makes up a chain, let's go through that so that we can then understand the principles of DAG and some projects that utilize DAG as well. Some really interesting ones, some you probably know already, but we'll go through them for sure for those that don't know. So very quickly, the structure of a block. Okay, so you see on the screen now, you got the transactions at the bottom, and then what they call the hashes, the root hashes, previous hash, and a block header. So in a nutshell, this is kind of like what they call a Merkle tree, right? So it's about like the roots of something, in this instance, data or a transaction, and then how that's created into arguably the tree method, and thus ultimately creating the block. Okay, so the block is essentially made up of 4 sections, basically securing various elements of data within each one. So the first part of the block maintains the size information, so i.e. like the data capacity to confirm the size of the data essentially. So within the second part of the block is what is known as the block header. So you can see these areas here. So there's the block header up here on your screen. So this is holding 6 elements within this part. Okay, so you got key data such as software protocol versions. There can be a multitude of different aspects of that, but they can be used essentially to help with potential upgrades or previous block hash information which is not reversible. You'll also find the timestamp on there. So this is very important when we talk about know your customer or the validity of a transaction using the Unix epoch time. So that's essentially what the methodology is used within blockchain to essentially represent a verification in the transaction and the timing and everything like that. So when you see your private key or you go on these like Ethereum scanners and things like that, you can clearly see the exact timings of everything and arguably locations potentially as well. Not to the extent of knowing exactly who that was, because obviously that's GDPR and that's not what blockchain was built for. But of course, so the difficulty target is also placed on there in terms of how difficult it was to create that aspect, and what they call the nonce, which will be present. So the latter being the process to ensure proofing of the algorithm by providing a random number. So this gives it the actual defining aspect of it being unique. So that's why you see a lot of private addresses like very long, right? And then finally, or certainly the penultimate one, the third part of the block obtains the transaction count. So basically the transaction number from the overall sequence. So this helps us by looking at a chain's historic data via the blocks. Okay, so any changes in the transaction data results in a new hash. So this could be like buying or selling something, or something has particularly changed within that transaction, the new hash is created. So bear all these little bits in mind, because this relates really to kind of like proof of work mechanisms and proof of staking that previously. So finally, the last part of the block is the transaction itself. Okay, so to which the reason the block is being created in the first place. The overall framework is defined as what we know as the Merkle tree. So that's very top line stuff, guys. If you want me to do a really detailed video of blockchain in general, and things like Merkle trees and hashes and all these things, let us know in the comments below, and I'll more than happily do a video on that. Maybe we'll do a live one or something like a Q&A session where you can live ask questions and stuff like that. But going to this whole point of proof of work and everything, also there's a mining structure within blockchain to help the processing, the confirmations of transactions, right? So we know these kind of methods, or have heard of these methods at least in your journey throughout, I'm sure, the crypto space that you have been within. So the Merkle tree that we're looking at right now combines multiple hashes of transactions, each being fed through an algorithm process. Okay, so this is arguably like what we're talking about if you think about the process of Bitcoin and how that's formulated. So thinking literally as a tree format, okay, the tree has roots and branches, okay, like trees do. The process is identified as 4 transactions originally, which you can see, for example, in this example here, 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. I don't know why we've got a 0 there, but hey ho. Of course, there's always a 0 in computing, right? So with each being fed through the process, and then by doing so, they're then combined and split into essentially 2 hashes, okay? So you've got these 4 hashes that are taken from the transaction, then you create the 2 here, okay? And this can be a multitude of different hash algorithms through each block within the chain, okay? So from combining the original 4, we then have the 2. This process is then repeated to generate the 1 hash, okay? So this final product will be what is known as the root hash, resulting in all the information above scaled into one definitive aspect within the chain. That is then put into the block and arguably within the chain. So you have more blocks based on these transactions, based on these hashes that create the blocks within the chain, hence the word blockchain, okay? So whilst it's still maintaining the original transaction data. So this is how it all comes together, okay? So yeah, there's various reasons why people use the blockchain, as we mentioned before. Of course, like we're trying to take things like legal printing of money or illegal printing of money, even though banks do it all day long. Things like know your customer. And we're then going more into an algorithm of how transactions can be utilized outside of finance. So we're talking about like AI algorithms, machine-to-machine learning, which we'll go into in a bit more detail in a second. But I wanted to give you like the brief overview of blockchain. So to understand the DAG mechanism, okay, so we know that blockchain uses methods such as proof of work, proof of stake. So you may notice these as like POW or POS. So this is like the mining aspect, okay, which tends to be the transactions that are grouped into blocks. So then into the chain, and hence its name, which we've already mentioned. By the way, if you would like a video on that, as I mentioned, do let us know. But for now, we can just mention that when a transaction is made on the likes of Ethereum or Bitcoin, for example, they're stacked upon each other as part of the Merkle tree, which we've just discussed. However, these transactional histories keep growing, okay? So these things keep getting bigger, and this is how we get into the DAG conversation. So this relates to more power being used and the time consumption as well, of course. Albeit this is not a massive issue as it once was, because the mechanism of these attributes of POS, POW are improving all the time. So DAG, however, is not grouped. Instead, it is processed transactions. Let's just take a look at this image here. So as an example, this isn't fully anticipated through crypto, but it gives you the philosophy of things, operating in almost like what I believe or feel as a quantum feeling to it, okay? So instead of processing transaction to transaction, it is instead processing transaction to transaction instead of block to block method that blockchain does. So why would people not like this? Well, typically it does not incentivize, as you would see with a POW system per se, but this is where people would weigh up its usage subject to what they would get out of it. But for general investors, it would be nothing much to think about other than hoping to make money in the charts, right? So because of the no mining aspect, we remove an extreme amount of labor work and thus bringing the cost down, the usage of blockchain coming down because everything's done quicker and on a peer-to-peer basis. So on average, a blockchain can confirm a transaction in around sort of 10 minutes, I believe, versus 10 seconds that a DAG system could do. So this is on average, of course, for a multitude of different chains. So we're taking blockchain mechanisms versus DAG systems here, okay? So that is quite a big difference, really. So 10 seconds to confirm a transaction as per 10 minutes on older systems. So, of course, bear in mind that, blockchain projects are vastly improving constantly all the time anyway, but still not on an average basis like DAG is. So the nature of DAG means it works very well for smaller or macro payment structures. So the speed at which operates and which very positive in this aspect, but in general, due to the reduction in data sizes per transaction, it brings all the positive aspects such as the efficiency, cost, and other elements into play. So there's a couple of projects that I've certainly invested in personally that relate to DAG. You may know some of these from this list. Hedera obviously being massive. IOTA we talk about quite often here. Nano is very interesting currency aspect of coin. Really looking forward to seeing the development of that over the next few years. Constellation DAG is a big one as well. Certainly one that I've dipped into recently, and I'm a big fan of Ubix, albeit very new, still young in my opinion, but I think that it's got loads of leg to go in the few years to come as DAG prevails, in my opinion. But before we go into full detail or some more detail of those kind of projects, I guess it's really just down to emphasizing that the more people that use the network, the faster it becomes within DAG. Okay, so hence removing the bottleneck and scalability issues that others face, in particular blockchain, that we've seen with issues of like network capacity and things like that. So such developments such as Hedera, which we would love to talk more about, that's HBAR. I have a big bag of those from earlier this year. I think I got Hedera maybe last November, December. So it's had a very good run this year. So these guys have the BFT integration, so the Byzantine fault tolerance. So in their case, it is what they call a synchronous, I think, meaning that no single node or group of nodes can interfere with the consensus process or change the consensus once the network has arrived at it. So why is all of this important? Not just from Hedera, but all these other ones. So IOTA using things like Tangle, you got DAG, you got Ubix, Nano, HBAR, all these people or projects utilizing DAG infrastructure. Largely, in my opinion, not just from a financial aspect, but from the arena of AI and OT, which I've done a lot of personal work within for the last 5-6 years. Well, let's think about IOTA, for example. So we talk about that quite often, but the utilization of the Internet of Things, so IoT is the abbreviation of that. This is basically anything that connects to the internet, right? So let's think about a transaction. So an action made by a device, but transferred data, possibly money too, outside of that. But via the action becomes the transaction. Hence we add the word transaction, right? So it is not always about currency. When we talk about machine-to-machine learning, which is something we're very much in the principle of right now, we're talking about the end game of what we are currently doing, which is kind of in the middle of human-to-machine or MTM, machine-to-machine. So we have to look outside this aspect at things which we use on a daily basis or interact with. That's gaining 24/7 data of ourselves, right? So we've got smartphones, you've got things like human psychology, purchasing behaviors generally, physically and mentally. All of these things can link together. DAG fits in with that, in my opinion. So, for example, if you book a hotel for a business trip, everything is already done for you via the M2M aspect, because it already knows you, your mood, your thoughts, your behavior, your choices, your timings, anything and everything. You need something very data driven and very powerful and quick to achieve this level of speed and transactional possibility. So when we go back to this whole aspect of a Merkle tree, and you think about the transactional or certainly the power behind or requirement needed to create these hashes, to create these transactions, what you'd want is something immediate, something that's going to pull in a multitude of different projects together to give you an answer. We talked about blocks move quite recently, but if you think about this, let's say like right in the middle here is your objective, i.e. your business meeting, for example, and then you've got all these other things in play outside of the arena. You might need clothes for your trip, you might need this, you might need that, you might need food, you might need transportation, tickets to things, transportation on a tube versus a cab, and all these things are utilizing perhaps different projects that we know as crypto assets right now, and obtaining them all through one sort of transaction within 10-20 seconds to be done on everything. So then your taxi arrives by itself, comes and picks you up, you've got your tickets already on your phone, and you can go on your flight to your business trip around the world. But before you go, the drone's going to drop something off to you at the train station, drop off depot because you've forgotten your toothbrush or something, and all of this cool stuff. So that's where it's all going to come into play, and that's where DAG really, really prevails. And you could arguably talk about perhaps something that's pushing itself against DAG. So multivac is another project that we talk about quite a lot. Okay, so if you want an alternative to something perhaps even on the next stage, or indeed something that will work alongside it, I quite like this. So on the multivac site, it says, why sharding over other scaling solutions? And it makes a clear observation here. So off-chain solutions such as state channels require trust relationships between the client and the state channel provider. Then it goes on to talk about DAGs. So DAGs require way too many network transmissions to be wieldy? Is that even a word? Don't know. In an open environment. Sharding is the only solution that has been proven to sustainably improve transactions per second in a decentralized, secure manner. Multivac believes that the most robust scaling solutions are built bottom up from the infrastructural ground level. For this reason, we use blockchain sharding as our core scalability approach. Now, that's a really interesting view on that. Of course, they're quite competitive against DAG, but I think that both have their own values. These guys are obviously very valuable towards existing blockchain projects, but I think DAG, it says here like it requires too many network transmissions, but that's the whole point of a DAG system. It operates in a multitude of things to happen quicker, quicker verification through the peer-to-peer model, right? So there's loads of things to consider about this aspect. And in my opinion, all of these technologies have a place in the crypto space, as it were. So as we mentioned, with DAG being very useful with the macro transactions or the requirement of multiple simultaneous actions, something like multivac can be used on a higher intensity level and perhaps a complex distributed application process due to its unique sharding ability. So, but the world is of course massive, right? Different countries, different regulations, different resolutions. There simply cannot just be one answer. So competition, in my opinion, is obviously very important for evolution and bringing the bridging aspect of these different kind of projects together to give you essentially the solution at the end, the fastest way possible. So we've obviously mentioned a few DAG related projects earlier already and within this list as well. But I want to go into won't go into like massive gigantic detail on each because we do cover some of them regularly, but some will be pulling out in the coming days for individual analysis as well, both the charts and their abilities. But here on CoinMarketCap, of course, we can see a good number of these available to trade and accumulate. Key ones personally in our portfolio right now: IOTA, HBAR, UBIX, and DAG. There are some other interesting ones. More recently, thanks to someone mentioning this on the People's Crypto Request, we do now have the DAG bag. Nano is one that we don't hold. It's an interesting one as it boasts utilizing DAG to provide zero fees whatsoever. I think for sure this is greatly interesting for that project in particular, especially being sort of catering itself as a currency. But for me right now, from my personal opinion, IOTA is probably the one for me personally that I think is probably the top one at the moment that's being very heavily integrated in various different commissions, various different government commissions around the world. I do know that Hedera is an absolute powerhouse too, and to be honest, any of these ones listed here, albeit I need to do some research on the bottom two, I would say have massive futures. It's, in my opinion, the next evolution of blockchain. Of course, utilizing some principles of blockchain and then taking it to another level. So if you think to yourselves of the historic background of crypto space, let's be honest, like Ethereum, Bitcoin, etc., very popular because you have mass awareness around them already, very long-term holders, within investments and stuff like that. But the tech is quite old. It is trusted, though, we have to admit, but you could use that principle along with other factors, of course, such as the market cap, supply, etc., to really appreciate that perhaps even in 5 years, let alone 10, where these DAG projects could be price-wise and adoption-wise. So before we wrap this video up, guys, I want to know if you're holding any DAG-related projects in your portfolio, which ones you believe in the most and why. We have no emotional attachment to our investments other than the belief in them, and in some cases some hope as well. So UBIX, for example, we just mentioned, I mean, this I think is personally a fantastic opportunity. You got Nano here, for example, on the payment systems and actually being a currency with no fees. You got things like Hedera, as we've just mentioned, absolutely phenomenal. I will do an intro video to this for those that are interested. IOTA was one of our favorite projects. We've done intro videos, we do regular videos on IOTA. This is a fantastic one for me, in my opinion. Very much going to integrate a lot of things around the world. Check out some detail on there. They call it the Tangle, so it is DAG, but they call it Tangle. It's very, very interesting. And you've got things like DAG Constellation as well, so the hyper distributed ledger technology using DAG protocol. Very exciting project as well. But here's a little infrastructure here as how validation occurs with the nodes and everything like that, and consensus models. Really, really interesting stuff on all of these, to be fair. But yeah, do let us know if you're holding any of these. But there is no right or wrong, because as we said, I'm sure many of these at some point will have to work with each other at some point to build a full ecosystem in a decentralized space that was arguably the whole promise of what this great technology revolution, i.e. blockchain, was essentially created for after all. So we are the Whales of Wall Street, guys. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. But if you want any more detail on either of these projects, especially ones that we don't cover regularly, let us know and we will cover them for you. But I just wanted to give a sort of top line introduction to DAG, because some people have asked questions about it. And like I said at the beginning of the video, if you want to learn more about blockchain in general, more than happy to do a video on that, and we'll do some real in-depth information around blockchain, and maybe even give you a step-by-step animated approach to how a blockchain is created and formulated as a transaction, and then thus how do we use it. So thanks for watching, guys. We will see you in the next topic related video. Bye bye.